Good afternoon, folks, as we all weave our way in. CWG members, if you want to put your hand up, I know we've got quite a few people coming today, so if you don't mind putting your hand up, just so we can identify you. Great.
Hello.
Good afternoon. We're just making sure that our CWG members have the ability to talk without.
My name's Justin. I'm a CWG member and I can hear and talk.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, me too. This is Jack over at SBHRS in Santa Clara.
Excellent, excellent.
Joe, it's Chris Morrissey with the Arena Authority.
Hi, Chris, welcome.
Weaver from Del Mas Park.
Welcome. Just figured it's easier to do this now than when we get to Q&A or report backs or whatnot, and we have to do the, can you hear me? We can get this going now.
Hi, it's Jonathan Evans from Old Quad Residents Association.
Welcome, Jonathan. Thanks for joining.
Bill Rankin with Friends of Five Wounds Trail.
Hey, Bill. Just give me 1 second. Sorry, I just have to go close the window. It's very bright. All right, we'll just give folks another minute or two to come on in. And just a reminder, if you're a CWG member, please use the raise hand feature right now. We're just going to unmute you so you have the ability to talk and ask questions throughout the presentation. Okay, got more folks coming in.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Hi there.
All right, we've got a steady stream of people joining us. We're now up to 30 plus attendees, so I think we're getting pretty close to quorum. Let's give it 1 more minute. If you're a CWG member and you haven't received talking powers yet, just use the raised hand feature and I'll do that for you. All right. Looks like we're good. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to VTA's BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 Extension Project. This is our February 16th meeting. So as most of you know, this meeting is we're having a combined CWG meeting. So we have the 3 different CWGs all in the same room. And so we wanted to do that to make sure that everyone had a great understanding of the project overview as we kick off a big year for the project. I just want to remind everyone that the next CWG meeting will be the normal one where we have the 3 different ones. But just for this first one of the year, we wanted to bring everyone together. It's also a great opportunity for you all to meet each other and to hear about questions, comments, concerns, and ideas that other CWG members have spread around the project. So today we're going to go through our usual welcome and introductions. We're going to catch up on the follow-up items from November's meeting, dive into a phase 2 project update, get a update on real estate and TOD. There's a moment on the business resource program that I know many are curious to hear about. Hear what's happening with community engagement. We've got Aaron Quigley coming for a brief government affairs update, and then our typical CWG member report back. I just want to give staff a moment to introduce themselves. So my name's Joe Clayton, and I'll be your facilitator tonight. Kristen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen May, and I will be helping to facilitate this meeting and driving the presentation.
Thanks. Bernice.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bernice Hallanese, Director of External Affairs for the BART Silicon Valley program, and thank you all for attending this evening.
Great. Erica.
Hi all, Erica Rokes from the External Affairs team for the program.
Great, thanks. Ron. Ron's just logging in, but Ron Gollum from VTA Real Estate has joined us.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone.
Great. Ramses and Brian.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ramses Madu, Division Manager of Planning, Policy, and Sustainability for the City of San Jose. Looking forward to speaking with you here in a minute.
And Brian Stanke, Rail Planning Manager for also with DOT.
Great. And Lucas.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Lucas Perez, BART Silicon Valley Community Engagement.
Thank you. All right. And our CWG members that we've got in attendance, we've got Jack Morash, Chris Morrissey, Terry Christensen, Fred Buzo, Alan Williams, Bert Weaver, Bill Rankin, Elizabeth Chan Hale, Jonathan Evans, Justin Triano, Luke DeVogler, Nathan Olsch, and we might have had some more people that have joined us. Helen, welcome to the meeting. And if you are a CWG member that's just joined us, please use the raise hand feature and I will bring you into the chat. All right. Not seeing any other raised hands. Let's keep going. So I know we have this slide at every CWG meeting, but for those that are unfamiliar with Zoom, we're using Zoom webinar for this meeting. And so generally speaking, people are on mute unless they are unmuted. However, CWG members can unmute themselves at any time. There's a chat and Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So if you don't want to raise your hand, or if you see something that you want to ask a question about immediately and don't want to lose it, put it in there. You can also use the raise hand feature if you want to speak rather than use the chat feature. We've got one person calling in on a landline or a cell phone. So use the *9, which creates a raised hand feature, and we can then unmute you. So typically we'll do about 2 minutes per question or comment, and we do ask that you keep it related to the agenda item. We also ask that you allow others to speak before raising your hand again. So just a reminder, as always, CWG members can hop in the conversation at any time, but we do ask that generally we keep it to the question section at the end of each presentation. I also want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded, and we use that to help us prepare the meeting notes that we distribute out after the meeting. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so we've got some meetings coming up that are probably of interest to many of you. We've got the next round of CWGs on the 17th, 18th, and 19th of May. Those meetings will be broken up into the usual station area meetings. So not like today. September and November will be similar to the May meetings. Now, the September and November meetings, at the moment, we're not scheduling an exact date, and that's because we noticed that over the last couple of years, we sometimes have CWG meetings that are driven by calendar and not by milestone. And so what can happen is that we might have something big and important coming up, but because of contractual reasons or board reasons, we're not ready to share some of that information. or we don't have all of the information available. So what we're going to try to do is give about 4 weeks notice, and that'll make sure that you have the most up-to-date relevant information. Because I know from experience that sometimes it can be a bit frustrating to have a community meeting or a public meeting, and then just a couple of days later or a week later, you see, oh wait, that's really big news. Why didn't they talk about it at the meeting? So that's why we're asking for a bit of flexibility for those September and November meetings. VTA Board of Director meetings. We've got one coming on the 3rd of March and then one on the 7th of April, both at 5:30, and the link's just there. I know for our Santa Clara residents that they've been looking forward to that March 22nd meeting. And so Kristen will send out email alerts for other meetings, for workshops, and also about that Santa Clara meeting to our Santa Clara CWG. All right. And with that, I will hand over to Erica. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I know at our last meeting in November, there were several questions about Santa Clara. So we wanted to circle back and get into a little bit of a deeper dive. As Joe mentioned, we're going to have a much deeper dive at the March 22nd City Council study session on the Santa Clara station, but wanted to touch on it today as well. So a reminder that in contract package 3 includes the Santa Clara station, which is an at-grade station and a 500 space parking garage, as well as the new haul yard and maintenance facility on the 44-acre site that VTA owns. On the maintenance facility site, there'll be a variety of different types of tracks. There'll be a train car wash facility, various maintenance shops and buildings and such, communication control towers and various options. Items. Next slide. So one of the questions that we received last time was, why is the access to the at-grade station via an elevated concourse? So since the project was approved in 2018, VTA shifted the Santa Clara BART station to be co-located with the maintenance facility within VTA's property. We looked at several configuration options, including locating the concourse underground and unloading ground level concourse and above ground concourse to accommodate all the essential elements for the operational BART station and maintenance facility. The concourse is elevated, providing access across the BART storage tracks. As I mentioned, we're going to get into a deeper dive of all the different options that we've studied at the study session. So Phil, encourage you to listen in if you're interested to learn more, and Kristen will let you know when that meeting is going to happen. Next slide. Oh, and there's a rendering there. Next, wanted to explain how the pedestrian access from the west side of the tracks to the existing undercrossing will occur. So BART patrons will access the boarding platforms. They'll come through the pedestrian undercrossing, which is labeled number 1. In the graphic here, then there'll be some new bicycle storage facilities at the end of the undercrossing, which is labeled number 2 here. They'll use the vertical circulation of either choice of 2 elevators or stairs to go up to the elevated platform, which is number 4, labeled on the figure. They'll pass through the fare gates and either take an option of escalators, stairs, or elevators down to the at-grade platform. So in total, the other option for accessing the station is from the east side, over from Champions Way, which isn't labeled on the graphic here as we're focusing on the west side access. But similarly, you can take elevator, escalator, or stair up from the east side over the elevated concourse, and then to pass through the fare gates adjacent to the number 4 and down to the at-grade platform. So in total at this station, there are 4 escalators, 6 elevators, and 5 sets of stairs. And this approach is consistent throughout the BART system. I'd be happy to take any questions. That's a little tidbit teaser in advance of the meeting at the end of March.
Thanks, Erica. I know that at least one attendee had some audio issues. So if you need to get any clarification from what Erica was saying, just hop in now. Jonathan, you've got a question.
Actually, my first question was on the meeting dates. Is there some guidance as to being consistent of a certain time, like a day and time, like, planning like 4 p.m. on Wednesdays, just so that those of us who may have work conflicts can try to reserve, time on our schedule so that, if we're typically open on like a certain time on a Wednesday or Thursday, we can try to plan for that.
Sure, I appreciate that. So I think we'll probably be going with the same cadence of the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So the typical approach that we had when we do have the normal 3 meetings. But we'll follow up on that just to make sure that we are actually hitting a time that works for everyone in the CWG, or as many people as possible. But I hear what you're saying, and we'll try to make sure that we do give you that opportunity to protect your time.
Yeah, thanks.
David.
Yeah, good afternoon. I connected late because of some technical problems. Did you do a roll call in the beginning?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Is there any way to know who's on this call if you missed the roll call? I mean, we're not allowed to see the other meeting participants any longer, and I think that's to the detriment of our participation.
Okay, I can quickly run through who from the CWG is here.
Well, let me tack on a question. Why is this being run as a webinar and has been run as a webinar recently and not as a participative, collaborative Zoom meeting?
Sure. So, David, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we've actually always run the CWG meetings as a Zoom webinar.
That's not true. We used to be able to see each other's faces, then we went to see each other's names, and then we went to a webinar format.
Okay, that may be a Zoom setting issue rather than that, because we have done them as a Zoom webinar. As you'll probably know, there were some issues with Zoom bombing that did happen to VTA, and so that was one of the reasons why a webinar was done. However, we're happy to look into that and make sure that we have those more collaborative settings switched on in the back end.
That would be helpful. I'd like to return to at least an emulation of what we used to have when we met in person, and that can be accomplished during using Zoom. And I fail to see the utility of these meetings having information thrown at us without us being able to at least have the opportunity to see each other, see who's around in the meeting. And anyway, some frustration here.
Sure, I appreciate that. Thanks, David. Jonathan, you've got your hand up. Is that another question or just?
Yeah, I also had a question about Erica's slides.
Great.
I guess I'm a little confused about the reply around the fact that it's like 8 flights of stairs to do a transfer between Caltrain and BART. And you mentioned that it's consistent with like BART's design guidelines. And I'd like to actually hear from BART as to why their design guidelines so inconvenience transit, people taking transit, and understand that consideration.
Yeah, sorry to clarify, when I explained the number of escalators, elevators, and stairs, that's from all access points to get to the station. So that's the number of facilities. So basically, if you're
I counted that there's 8 in your diagram. There's 8 flights of stairs to go from 1 to 5 to get from the Caltrain.
Kristen, do you mind going back to that slide, please?
So there's 2 flights of stairs per story. You're up 3 stories, so there's 6 to go up. I'm assuming 1 flight to go down to the BART, and then another flight to get to the Caltrain from the tunnel. That's at least 8 flights of stairs, depending how you define flight, or more in a typical system.
So there's 1 between the platform and the concourse, and then 2 to get down to the undercrossing, 2, 3, and I only see 3 on this end, and then whatever it is on the BART side. So I'm not quite sure where you're getting 8, but yeah, I guess what's standard for how BART operates is the fact that you have to go through a fare gate system to get down to the platform. And so it is common within the BART system to have this elevated concourse. It's in line with their standards. There is what I was the intent of that consistent approach. The number in particular, varies throughout BART station to BART station, but this is what we're providing is in line with standard with what BART provides.
Sure, but like other platforms, I think including some BART ones, try to align that so you don't have to go out of your way to do some sort of transfer. So the fare gates are often in line with the modal change, and it looks like we're not doing that here. So
right, and so that's where at the meeting in March we're going to do a deeper dive into why we're not doing that here. So
okay,
we'll want to connect with you as well in advance on that. So Bernice, I see you have your hand up. And you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
Sorry. I am just wondering if we can maybe do a little tutorial or something, because I'm thinking maybe some of the issues about visibility are more on individual settings. Like I see everyone that's on the call, and not that everyone has their camera, but I can scroll and see every member that's logged on. So I'm just wondering if there's any kind of tutorial, if it's the way the meeting's set up or there's some individual settings. And I don't know whether that's a difference between, I believe all the CWG members have a different access than the general public, right? So the CWG members should be able to see everything. So I'm just not understanding the problem, because maybe I'm not experiencing it. And I don't know if it's because of my device or what that might be.
It was a security setting, and we are going to find a way to fix it. The quick solution for that, and thank you, Alan, is just to promote CWG members to panelists, and then they will be able to see each other.
Okay.
So I can actually do that during the next part of the presentation. Sorry, I don't have a mouse. I'm only working on one screen and without a mouse, so it's going to take a while. So that's why I'll need
okay,
the break that the next slide deck will provide. Okay. All right, over to you and Ron. Good thing you're already queued up, Bernice.
Yeah. So as we just discussed a little bit about on transit-oriented development, I wanted to just remind everyone of what our procurement schedule is and where we are with the various contracts. As you are all aware, we have 4 major contracts to deliver the BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 Extension Project. The first contract is the systems contract, and that is really the systems, all the communications and everything that really will operate and control the BART system. The tunnel and track work contract is our largest contract. It comprises about 65% of the total project cost. And that tunnel and track work contract, we actually are getting very, very close to contract award, either sometime in the April or May timeframe we're looking at, depending on the negotiations and when we can get it to our admin and finance committee and then the full board. The new hall yard in Santa Clara Station is for those two specific aspects of the project, and we are getting close to issuing an RFP on that. And then in a similar time frame, we have our stations contract for the 3 other underground stations. So this timing, and you can see that construction will go through about the 2028 timeframe period, really is what will drive when we can start some of the activities for the actual construction of TOD once we're off of those project sites. But Ron can give you a little more information on the timing of engaging potential developers. I see Nathan has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Bernice. Appreciate the update. Nathan here, San Jose Downtown Association, specifically on the tunnel and track work and the overall time frame. I'm curious to hear if the timing, I will say, is accurate, considering there might be some incongruences on perhaps what FTA is assuming. Is 2030 accurate? Is 2032? I've heard it might be 2034. And thank you for the update on, I think it's the CP2s that you're referencing in terms of the RFPs. I'm just curious to know if we've got all the bids back, and it sounds like we have.
We for the contract package 2, that's the tunnel and track work package. We do have a higher score of the proposals, and that's who we're negotiating with, right? And if everything comes to fruition, once we engage that progressive design builder, the first element of work, phase 1 of that, is actually doing a more cost certain, schedule certain So that's when we'll have a more definitive idea of the timeframe for the actual period of construction for the tunnel and track work. We did add 10 months to that schedule based on feedback from potential bidders and factoring other things in. So we did add 10 months into our most recent schedule that we shared with the board. We added 6 months, I think, in December, and then at the January, we added 4 months. So we did add a total of 10 months into that CP2 contract work. The 2034 numbers that you just were mentioning were some numbers that were in part of the risk assessment. I just want to remind everyone that we did have a risk assessment by the FTA and the project management oversight consultant. And there were some added contingencies in that also schedule, but we are in the process, as we were awarded the LOI through the FTA, to refine those project costs and schedules as we get these bids in and we get more certainty on the cost and schedule. So Nathan, I hope that clarified that, so that those numbers have some added contingency that weren't initially factored in. And that contingency, many of it was based on the early levels of design from an application back in about a year ago. So last February.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
Thanks. And this is actually a perfect segue because just the CP2 contract, it is being delivered through Progressive Design Build, and wanted to just share, most of these larger contracts up until very recently were design build, but there have been some very good examples in other mega projects using Progressive Design Build. There's also another tunnel project, the Silicon Valley Water tunnel project, that's using Progressive Design Build. And what this delivery methodology does is it really incorporates the contractor involvement earlier. So it allows us to continue in collaboration with the contract awardee, and that contractor is based on qualifications, and they utilize the preliminary design that VTA provides. And then we work hand in hand with that contractor to advance that initial design phase and through construction. So like on the CP2 contract, we have the phase 1, which will be basically advancing the design. And that's at the point where we'll get more of that cost and schedule certainty. So it leads to this Progressive Design Build leads to more feasible design and better cost effectiveness. And the cost is evaluated iteratively. So we work and we know exactly where the Progressive Design Builder is, because they're in continual conversations about what those open book estimates are. And it really does also provide an opportunity to maximize innovation. And Progressive Design Build also reduces some of the risk to the overall project. So that is how we decided to pursue this Progressive Design Build for this largest contract. And this gives a process, as I mentioned, for stage 1. We collaborate with the contractor as well as the city of San Jose. Will be, because the majority of the work will be with the city of San Jose, and we advance that pre-construction design from the level of design that they did the bid on to 90%. It will also include pre-construction activities, geotechnical work, utility relocations, and also the early work of procuring that tunnel boring machine. And then that second stage is actually the contractor providing a proposal for the actual construction cost, and that's where we get those definitive construction schedule and risk mitigation proposals. They complete the design, and then we go into construction.
Bernice, we've got a question from Fred.
Hi, Fred.
Yeah. Hey, how are you? So yeah. So then when would you expect to enter into stage 2 then? Or to be completed with stage 2, I should say. Any idea at all? Or?
Well, we have the original schedule, right, that showed stage 2 is completed, I think, first quarter of 2028, but we will have much more certainty when we get that stage 1. The first initial bid we get from this Progressive Design Builder is for the stage 1, but there is an estimate included for stage 2. And then as they advance that design in stage 1, that's where we get that more cost and schedule certainty of stage 2, which is the axle construction.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. David.
Yes, as far as this process, this procedure, when will the protections for the landmark or historical buildings be included? What stage of design build, for instance, will Five Wounds Church be included as far as the mitigations, the protections, with the lasers and the tectonic monitors and everything else?
Sure.
When is that?
So we have already been reaching out. There are approximately, I think, 42 properties identified as historical properties. There's two sets. We have 42 properties. We've done research. We've done some video, right? We got permits to enter. We've been working with those property owners and tenants to do a videotaping of existing conditions, right? And then there's been a structural analysis of those. So that information has already been provided to the engineers, right? And it will be provided to the progressive design builder. In addition to that, we also have, I believe there's around 200 properties that are related to the tunnel protection zone. And we're working on that right now to get into those properties, do pre-construction surveys to document existing conditions. And then we'll be installing in all those properties, both the historical properties. Some of the historical properties, there might be some additional efforts to ensure that they're protected. I don't know all the specifics on the individual properties, but there could be some kind of structural supports or things depending on the structures, right? But on the other properties related to the tunnel protection zone, those properties, there are, I think, maybe 10, I'm not sure, but there will be some other measures to enhance protection of those. And then we'll also be installing on properties, vibration monitoring and such, to vibration and settlement monitoring. It won't necessarily be every property, but there will be representational sampling so we can be monitoring that all through construction. So we're doing that work ahead of the contractor going in. So that's why we've already done all the historical properties. And I believe Five Wounds, we've already done those documentations and analysis on the Five Wounds Church and the school.
Great. Thanks, Bernice. I just want to hop in. We've had a question in the chat from a CWG member, and Jonathan. Oops, sorry.
Real quick, I just wanted to add on to that real briefly. So we've done those initial assessments, and then once the contractor comes on board, we'll be working with them to determine what's placed on in each building or how we're going to be monitoring, and then that will be installed before construction begins, just to kind of close the loop. So that's the time frame of the when that will happen, David. Go ahead, Joe.
Sure. It's a question from Jonathan, but I'm actually going to ask our presenters to keep this in mind. When you are discussing timeframes, timelines, and contract delivery mechanisms such as design build, if you can just clarify and make sure people understand which contract specifically you're talking about. So Jonathan, I reworded your question because I thought it was actually a good point to make. I hope that's okay.
Just thank you. That was fine. I just wasn't clear which of the contracts we were talking about in the last 5 minutes for design build, if it was CP2 or CP3 or one of the other ones.
So there's the one contract that's progressive design build is the tunnel and track work contract package 2. The other 3 contracts are design build. Does that help? And then Joe, can you bring up the framework slide again? That really tells where the difference. So this tells you the framework, we call it, right? Where each element of the contracting process is. The green check marks are those completed elements. We've done all of the yellow, which was request for industry feedback. All of the RFQs have been done. And then in the orange, you can see that we've done the request for proposals for tunnel and track work, and the request for proposals for system. We have yet to do the RFPs for both the New Hall Yard Santa Clara station and the other 3 underground stations. And then the darker blue is the actual construction period for each of those contracts.
Great. We've had a question. How far throughout the corridor is the testing being done?
As far for the historical properties and tunnel protection zone, and I mean, the entire corridor is for those properties that were identified in the historical property program. And the same for tunnel protection.
Chris, I just want to note, we've been trying to promote you to panelist, but something on your end keeps rejecting it.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I was late. I was with customer. I'm still at my boutique. But my question was about the corridor, how far throughout the corridor. Is that going to include where the San Jose hospital site is projected to be? Is that part of the testing that can't be considered historic? It's not even built yet.
Is that around 17th Street? I'm not familiar.
Yes.
I will have to check with the engineering team, but when we're looking at the properties, we're looking at the existing conditions and protecting the properties that are in existence. I'm not sure, depending on those development plans, if they will work around, like, we will be anything that is related or close proximity to the future tunnel and that tunnel protection zone. We're working with the city of San Jose on a process that VTA and the BART project will be involved in those development proposals and such to make sure that this major infrastructure is not compromised in any way.
Right. Okay, great. You answered that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Jonathan.
Oh yeah, you mentioned there's 42 historical properties that have been identified. Is there a list somewhere where we can find out what those 42 properties are and the current status of each of them?
We have a list, and let me just make sure that there's not any, what do I want to say? Make sure there's not any violations of privacy laws or anything before we release that information. But if there are not, I can definitely share that.
Okay, I'd assume that would they have to be included in an EIR somewhere as well?
I believe they were all identified in the EIR, EIS, but I'm just not sure if there would be any kind of privacy in releasing it through another venue, but I will double check on that.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Just in the interests of time, let's keep going.
Okay, so I'll pick up there. I think Bernice, when she talked about CP2, just so everyone's aware, all of the real estate acquisition is actually part of CP2. So just to recap, everyone may recall that when we issued the draft environmental document in 2018 for the phase 2 project, that identified all the potential property acquisitions. And at that time, we notified all of the owners that in fact, that we might be acquiring the property. And that list, of course, was finalized at the time we adopted the record of decision. Subsequent to that, in late 2018, we did a separate study that looked at not just the property acquisition, but of course, a number of properties have tenants, either residential or commercial, and what the relocation might be, who would be affected, the kinds of users, the kinds of assistance. And that was a relocation plan that was adopted by the VTA board in December of 2018. Now, moving forward, in late 2020, we actually started the property acquisition process. So we've now been acquiring property for nearly a year and a half. Our first focus, of course, has been the surface sites where the stations are in the service facilities. Just to give you an overview of what's involved in the property for the project, there's 3 main categories. The first category is what we call fee simple. It's a real estate term where it means we're buying the property outright, so we own all of the property interests for either all of the site or a part of the site. So for example, that would include where we're buying the site for the San Jose downtown BART station, where we're buying the property for the 28th Street Little Portugal station. It would also include ventilation, the mid-tunnel ventilation sites, and so on. The next category then is about easements. And so this is where we buy sort of a series of rights to use portions of property. And of course, The most significant easements are the tunnel easements. So although most of the tunnel is under either Santa Clara or Stockton, and being the public right-of-way, we have the authority to build in that public right-of-way. There are sections where the tunnel makes a movement off of either of those streets and goes under private property. And so we have to acquire tunnel easements from those property owners to be able to build the tunnels under the property. Easements also include things like utilities and kind of other needs that we have, special ingress, egress needs, and so on. Then the third category really relates to temporary construction easements. And so this is really a situation where we have to buy the right to a property for a period of time to do the construction. Typically it's from late 22, early 23 until we have substantial completion of construction and ready to open. And then after we're done, we return the property to the owner. And that's particularly the case, especially around the East Portal. There's a number of sites where we need a bigger footprint to actually be doing the construction. And sometimes you have a combination of these interests. So we might have a combination on property where a portion of the property we're buying fee simple and a part of it is a temporary construction easement. I will also say that in terms of other types of property needs that we have, and Bernice was touching on this, but just so everyone's clear, is that when we look at property protection, as she mentioned, there's about 11 properties that are pretty much directly adjacent to the excavation site. And so that's where we're going to need to do some work and get some easements from the owner to stabilize the ground, or in one or two cases, we have to strengthen foundations to make sure that our excavation work, where we're excavating for the tunnel or the ventilation facility, will not damage those buildings. And then, of course, as Bernice mentioned, there's a much larger program along the tunnel to actually set up on a voluntary basis monitoring and measurement of buildings, just to ensure that there's no harm to the other adjacent properties. So I had mentioned this earlier, but in addition to the real estate also, there is relocation. So as we've been buying properties, we've also been dealing with tenants and the relocation that needs to occur. And this work to acquire property and dealing with the relocation, we're well underway, and we will still be doing this through at least, we should be completed by the end of 2024. And of course, they'll be closed out and other follow-up after that, but that's a quick overview. So I'm being prompted to shift gears and talk about transit-oriented communities. And so really what this discussion now is the other hat that my group wears in this, and that's about not just the property that VTA owns or that will own after the completion of construction that presents the opportunity for transit-oriented development, but it's also been our vision for the project about how do we work with the city and private property owners around the stations to maximize the overall amount of TOD that happens throughout the station area. So not just the little piece of property that VTA owns, but the entire few hundred acres that's around each of these stations. That's really where you're going to see the most impact in people wanting to develop in response to BART. The graphic you see on the screen is from the transit-oriented community study we did a couple of years ago to identify this potential. And what these bars show, the boxes show, is for the 4 station areas, it's a very quick assessment of which properties are under improved and likely to redevelop over a time frame. So it could be 10 years, 20 years, could be 30 plus years in the future. I want to be really clear that these boxes here, there are no VTA plans. This is an assessment. Some of these sites may never develop. Other boxes that are not colored may end up being redeveloped. The point of this exercise is to show that there are a lot of properties, when you look at kind of the current use and the current level of development, really do present prime opportunities for redevelopment for denser mixed use TOD type projects. And of course, everyone's most familiar with downtown West around Diridon Station, where Google has approved entitlements for its project. The city had approved other development around there. When you add up all of these numbers, we believe long-term there's the potential for 60 million square feet of new mixed-use residential and commercial development around the BART stations, which really means there's an opportunity to develop, to really accommodate a lot of the Silicon Valley's future growth around the BART extension. Yeah, the next slide, please. I'm just going to run through each of the stations individually. And I guess we're not getting the image here, which I'm not sure why. Oh, it's a fade. Okay. So this is from our transit-oriented community study, and this is really kind of a rendering to show the concept of, because the station is to the north of Santa Clara Street, but for example, we own the vacant lot at the corner, the northwest corner of Santa Clara and 28th, how this TOD might be done and what it could look like. I will share with you that, as you may know, the city of San Jose is preparing to start the 5 Loons Urban Village Plan update later this year. VTA has been coordinating with the city on that. In fact, in line with our transit-oriented communities approach, we've gone out and gotten grant funding, and we're actually working with the city to provide technical assistance for the Urban Village Plan effort. In parallel with that effort, VTA will also be hiring a contractor to prepare a design development framework for the property that VTA owns at the end of the project, which will be about 10 acres around the station, as well as the former UP right-of-way on the west side of 28th Street. This design development framework will be a similar concept to what we did for the downtown station. It'll have a little different focus though, because really what we're trying to do with this design development framework is have a very intensive community engagement and use this effort to both take the Five Lagoons Urban Village Plan framework and guidance and develop it to another level of detail to really, in a very much a collaborative process with the community, articulate a vision for the development that will happen on VTA's property to then inform future developer selection and evaluation of development proposals. And I will say that, and this is something we've been very focused on based on Councilmember Peralez's direction, but between us and the city, we've also been thinking about ensuring that there is a single community engagement process. So when there are public meetings, folks can come to meetings and learn about the Five Lagoons Urban Village Plan, learn about what VTA is doing, and not have to chase different pieces of the project in different venues. Next slide, please. This is a rendering from our design development framework. So as folks may know, we own already about 70% of the block between Market and North First in Santa Clara and St. John. We had acquired that for construction staging area. We're now in the process of acquiring the Chase Bank building, which is where the BART station will be. So the design development framework for the downtown station, which has been accepted by the VTA board, provides a framework for how we create world-class TOD at the site, how we meet city requirements, how we create mixed-use development, how we ensure something that is sustainable and really kind of connects well surrounding station area, how that can be done. It's intended to provide guidance to developers and again, serve as a document to help us evaluate development proposals. The VTA board of directors has authorized us to begin the first stage of selecting a developer for VTA's properties. We will expect to begin that probably middle of this year. And so we'll go through a process to bring a developer for VTA's property. But of course, there's other owners on the block that own the other 30%. And so a key principle here will be, once we have our developer, is to work with the other property owners and really come up with a single master plan for the entire block, because that is really the only way that you can both maximize the quality of what happens when you're dealing with a full city block, but you can also most effectively kind of address how you coordinate all the different issues in terms of access and parking and service and so on when you have multiple property owners. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier in the Diridon BART station area, and of course, Google's effort. Google's the Downtown West application, that included approvals for VTA to build up to 500 units of housing above the Diridon BART station. And I will also say that all of our work, both for the BART station design and working with other partners, is also supportive of the Diridon Intermodal Station Concept Plan, the phase 1 concept plan that was involved the city, VTA, Caltrain, and high-speed rail. And the next phase of that project is still in front of us, but it's another part of our thinking about how we really create a transit community that deals with all the modes and all the development opportunities, both Google, as well as other properties in Diridon that are covered by the city's Diridon Station Area Plan that they recently approved. Next slide, please. And then finally, in the Santa Clara Station area, the property that VTA already owns, which will be the location of the New Hall Maintenance Facility in the Santa Clara Station. We don't own property that will really provide a site for transit-oriented development there. But what you see here is this image that really talks about how a transit-oriented community can arise. And so this is a view on Brokaw Road. To the left, what you see across the street is the City of Santa Clara's approved Gateway Crossings project, residential mixed-use project by Hunter Storm. This is a vision of how Santa Clara Street could look in the future. And again, we've been working with the city. We went out and did obtain a grant for TOD planning, and we are working with the city to make that grant available to provide assistance to the city in its work to create a Santa Clara Station Area specific plan. And the timing with the city is still being worked out, but we're hopeful that that effort will be underway before the end of this year. Next slide. And I think that sums up a really high level overview of both real estate and TOD, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Nathan is up first, and then we've got Elizabeth.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the presentation. Ventilation shafts, pretty significant question here. We have some concerns about the current proposal and was curious to know a little bit more about this. Specifically between second and third, that block in particular. Have we done any outreach to the property owners, the business owners, the fear of it not being able to be built vertically? I think it's going to be capped at a certain point. Obviously, engineers are way smarter than me. I don't want to get into too much detail on it, but definitely from a long-term envisioning plan, this is, you know, a 100+ year project. We want to make sure that what's being presented and what gets built is long lasting and fits with the overall construct of Santa Clara and downtown San Jose, quite frankly. Sure. And so with that, and then obviously south end entrance, the knockout panel, et cetera, it's a bit of a puzzle or a quagmire, right, as you start piecing everything together. So definitely really appreciate the diligence in trying to get us this far, but curious to know, you know, it's kind of a dead area once you put that ventilation shaft in there, and then, you know, shaft noise, accessibility, et cetera.
Sure.
Any plans, backup plans?
Let me kind of narrow your question to the 3 kind of ventilation facilities, and I'd be happy to kind of do follow-up after that. Okay. So as folks may recall, there's mid-tunnel ventilation facilities at Stockton Street, and there's also one at 13th and Santa Clara. At Stockton, for that facility, we committed the environmental document to architectural treatment. So when you look at this facility, you know, you see something that looks like a building. It doesn't look like a blank wall or something that's utilitarian, but it's actually integrated in the neighborhood. I think for Stockton Avenue, the issue that we struggle with, to be candid, is that it's not really a retail corridor. And so while one strategy is to put retail space in front, if you put retail space in front and it never gets leased and it's not occupied, that's not really helping the image of the corridor. So that's an issue that we're working through. At 13th and Santa Clara, based on where we are going to need to build a ventilation shaft. At this point, we do expect that when we're done, we'll have a property that's available for development right at the corner of 13th and Santa Clara, which will be kind of a smaller space, but it's a site that could, for example, accommodate a mixed-use building that might have ground floor commercial and a couple stories of residential above it. One of the challenges you have when you have these developments next to the ventilation structure is that while I think we'll have an opportunity to put a retail or service use right at the corner of 13th and Santa Clara and help activate the corridor, you know, it's also the case that because of the proximity and the way things are designed, there are structural loading considerations. So we're not going to be able to take a little piece of the corner and put a 12-story building on top of it. It'll be something that's more in the realm of a couple stories or several stories at most. Now, with respect to, you asked about the site that's at 3rd and Santa Clara, which is actually one of the emergency egress and ventilation sites for the downtown station. We've been talking to that owner for the past couple of years, and we've also been engaged with Councilmember Peralta's office. And we've had a very similar thought process, which is how do we ensure that we have the minimum footprint that enables the necessary ventilation facility to be built that meets all code requirements and life safety and so on, but presents a development opportunity. You know, the challenge there is that we are going to have to demolish the 2 small buildings at the corner because there's simply no way to build it without doing that. You know, when you think about these ventilation facilities, it's equivalent to we're building an 8-story office building, but upside down underground. So think about starting at the surface and going down 8 stories. At this point, we do believe that there will be a parcel that's left. And so there will be an opportunity right at the corner of 3rd and Santa Clara, again, for a smaller scale building, smaller footprint than what's there today. But we will have an opportunity to have, again, probably anywhere from 2 to 4 stories, ground floor commercial, residential above it, and then have a little bit of storefront space further down along Santa Clara Street to try to hide the space. And so, you know, we've been working quite a bit to really figure out how we minimize the facility while meeting the functional needs, while also trying to maximize the opportunity to provide the kind of use of property and the kind of exposure that really supports the commercial corridor and the activity.
So will that look, technical term, funky with all the other high rises around it, or is that going to, I assume, the design work?
You know, that's a great question. I think what I would suggest from my perspective is that, you know, this comes up in a couple other places as well. If you look at any city setting, you know, and this is just a function of how cities organically evolve over time, you will see high-rise buildings, and you might see on the next block a shorter building. You know, cities don't have buildings all at a uniform height, and so you have a variety of heights that are in there. And so, you know, I think that ultimately, when you think about kind of what that looks like, we're doing everything that we can, and then of course it's about what the other owners do. I think when you look at how downtown looks, you know, 20, 30 years down the road, I think if we do a good job, and I think if the other owners do a good job, the fact that you have a variation in heights and you might have in a couple of places these short structures is not going to detract from the experience of what a great downtown San Jose will have.
Great. Elizabeth, Jonathan, and that's the next order. And Anna, we will follow up with you with in the project summary, sorry, our meeting summary that we send out, because we are running a bit behind time. Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank you, Joe. And around the question actually came from a resident. We're talking about the downtown station. So we live around the downtown station. So we can understand, you know, and you just mentioned that you're purchasing these properties to build the downtown station. And she also read in the Mercury News that you're also purchasing some commercial properties, which are probably the ones that she uses on the 7th Street and 8th Street, that area, probably near Lee Sandwiches. So that puzzled us, and I thought this is a good time. And I know you just mentioned that you may be purchasing not the building, but the easement permanently or temporarily. But are you purchasing buildings outside where the station? Because I told her the station should be between Market and 3rd, right?
Yeah. So anyway, nice to see Elizabeth, and appreciate the question. I think we are not acquiring property around 7th Street where Lee Sandwiches is. And I think the person who's asking you, she may be a little bit confused. Back when we were doing the planning and we did the environmental review, we did have different options where the station will be located, and the different options for where the downtown station will be located did have different additional needs. And so there was a point in time at which that corner at 7th Street where Lee Sandwiches is would be required. However, because we chose in the final plan to locate the downtown station where the Chase building is, we do not have a need for property at 7th Street.
Oh, okay. So all the buildings you're purchasing will be around the station, right? In that area.
Yeah, well, again, for the block that's between Market and First and Santa Clara and St. John, we already own 70% of that block. We don't own the corners of that block, but we pretty much own everything that's not the corners, with the exception of the Chase Bank building. And so the Chase Bank building is the one that we're in the process of buying right now, because that will be the site of the downtown BART station. So once we buy it, we'll tear down the building and then build the BART station in that location.
Okay, thank you.
Jonathan, over to you, and then we'll move on to the next item. Just for people who are trying to keep up with things, we are running about 10 to 15 minutes behind, so we do apologize if it goes over, but we have a bunch more exciting presentations coming up that I'm sure you want to stay on for.
Much more exciting than mine, I'm sure, Joe.
Yes, as Nathan called out, like this project, you know, is like a long-term thing, right? Where it's going to be here for hopefully 100 years or more. Right. And so around Santa Clara Station, I actually had a question. There's the New Hall Yard, and that's really close to the station and other transit. And I was wondering if, as part of the yard, if there's any planning for putting in considerations about building up potentially housing or other uses as that part of Santa Clara potentially urbanizes going forward.
Sure. It's a great question. It's something we've been thinking about. You know, the biggest challenge with essentially that decking approach, and I'll set aside the transit considerations because there's complications with the underground uses, but the biggest challenge, and this is where we looked at it, and I've actually worked on this in other parts of the country on similar projects, is that when you look at building essentially a concrete deck or podium over a yard like that, so you have a base for putting buildings, that is a tremendously expensive exercise. And what we run up against is that when you look at the height limits that exist from the FAA in that area because of proximity to the airport, it caps out at about 12 stories. And the challenge is that when you have 12 stories to work with, you don't have enough value that you're creating that can both cover the cost of building the podium as well as the building. Typically, you need to get to more like 20 stories. And if you're by chance familiar with the Hudson Yards project in New York City, which is the most famous recent example, you know, there you're talking about the developer built, 40 plus stories over the Amtrak yards that are to the west of Penn Station. So I think that it's something that we've thought about and we're trying to accommodate the future option, but it's not something that's any time in the near term. And frankly, to get to a longer term opportunity, you'd have to see some combination of a change in the height limits from the FAA, or you'd have to see some change in construction technology that makes this type of work and building buildings on top of podiums much less expensive than it is today. Now, having said that, this goes back to the Trans-Northern Community Study, is that, there's a lot of opportunities for redevelopment, and we've talked to some of the existing owners. And so I think if you think about the longer time frame, for example, that retail center that is on the west side of the tracks, just south of Railroad Avenue, that has the retail and the hotel and some office buildings. That's clearly an underused property, and that's going to be redeveloped at some point. And that's a very big site with a lot of opportunity. When you look at the site that's to the north of Broke Hall, the warehouse there, between kind of the station and the Costco site, that's a large property, huge opportunity. When you look at the site that's across the street, across Coleman near the airport, in the city, that's also a lot of opportunity for reusing those industrial buildings. And then, of course, there's the work that Hunter Storm's been doing between the Coleman High Line and those projects. And they even bought 10 acres next to the Newhall maintenance facility from the city a couple of years ago. That will also be another big site there. And so when we did the Transurban community study and we looked at the development potential in that station area without building anything on top of the station, we think there's a long-term potential for about 12 million square feet of development, mixed-use development of all types, which is a very substantial amount of future development.
So while podium maybe doesn't make sense now, is at least their consideration and when doing the layout, making the facility capable of supporting that in the future?
Yes, I mean, we are trying to accommodate it as best we can, and there's trade-offs in there. So there's assumptions you have to make about how you would be able to locate structural columns in the future, but we also need to make sure we have something that works with BART trains. And so those are the considerations we've been juggling, but it is something we've been absolutely looking at.
Great. All right. Thank you, Ron. I appreciate that. Let's keep going. All right, over to Ramses. Folks, I know you're probably going to have a lot of comments and questions on this one, so let's give Ramses his time.
All right. Good evening, everybody, again. For those who weren't there when I introduced myself earlier, I'm Ramses Madhu. I'm the Division Manager of Planning, Policy, and Sustainability for the City of San Jose, and the Project Manager for the Airport Connector project. Yeah, let me go to the next slide then. Let's keep going. All right, so the Airport Connector project is obviously incredibly important in many ways, but one of the most important things that it'll do is connect the BART, Caltrain, light rail, buses, high-speed rail, and whatever else will be coming to Diridon Station to the airport. Right, and so this is an illustration from the Diridon Integrated Station concept work, where the future of Diridon is being designed, and you can see there the airplane there right in the middle is the tentative spot of where this project might connect in to that work, and again, that would be right in near where the BART building would be. That's most certainly not decided yet, but yeah, just illustrating how important this is to the conversation you all have. Next slide, please. So a lot of people are asking us at the City of San Jose, why are we taking this on? Transit development, shouldn't that be VTA? And as you can tell with all the meetings you've been having with them, VTA's got its hands full. And it doesn't have the capacity to take this on at the moment. And so the City of San Jose has really been thinking about its priorities in terms of transportation, and is going to be bringing the Access Mobility Plan, which is actually now called Move San Jose. I need to update this slide, apologize, which is our citywide transportation plan. And in that plan, we've brought together all of the directions we've gotten from council, from the general plan on, and did a lot of work through public workshops to really refine what we see as the goals for transportation in the city. And those 9 of them here, won't go through much of any of them, but I will say we have a very keen interest in seeing a more environmentally sound transportation system, one that accommodates transportation for all folks, access for all, including those with limited mobility, and really want to see less driving, particularly in places like downtown. And to be able to do that, we really need more transit. Next slide, please. And so as part of that plan, these are some of the transit strategies. There's a good bit more. But we're really wanting to see, of course, improved existing transit service. We're doing actually a transit first policy in San Jose, looking at where we should be putting things like bus only lanes and improved transit signal priority, things like that. But transit expansion. Transit expansion is going to be an adopted strategy of the city of San Jose. And we really feel like we need to take on a larger responsibility for trying to get that done. You know, BART, East Ridge, these things are fundamental to us seeing more transit, but we really need to see more. And so we're trying to play an active role in bringing new ideas and new projects to the table for our region. Next slide, please. All right, so the project process so far. Now, some of you have seen earlier versions of these slides. I presented to the CWGs just before the closures, before the pandemic closures. So I apologize if I'm repeating some of the things you already know, but sometimes a refresher is good. The airport connector was adopted as part of Measure A in 2000. The mayor likes to remind me when we talk to him about this, that the airport connector was the second most popular project on that project list, only behind filling potholes. So people and the general public find this to be a valuable project. Now, it's a long time since 2000. What's happened since then? In short, a lot of studying. The initial concept was to have an alignment that went from Santa Clara station under the airport, connect to Terminal B, which is the southwest terminal, and then go over to the North First Street light rail. Champions were just not really showing up to get this done. The city of San Jose really wanted to become a champion of it, but wanted to look at alignments on that. And so in about 2015, 2016, we took on a study ourselves, which we published in 2017, that showed that an alignment, instead of this east-west alignment, the north-south alignment going from the airport directly to Diridon would be a great deal more productive in terms of generating usage and having a better impact. And of course, that has to do with all the development downtown, but also the confluence of so many more transit trips coming into Diridon. High-speed rail, of course, being kind of the cherry on the cake there, or so with that new alignment study, we started looking at what kinds of technologies we could look at and do to accomplish that. After looking through a study or two, we were directed by council to put out a request for information that went out to the world and said, hey, there seems to be some new ideas in transit out there. This is when Boring Company was a little more new than it is now, and we're seeing some other technologies coming to fruition, and we wanted to see if there was much reality to those ideas. And so we put out a request for information that we developed in concert with VTA, cities of Cupertino and Santa Clara, looking at what else could we get. And we were expecting maybe 2, 3, 4 responses at most. We ended up getting 23 responses, which kind of blew us away. And what we learned in there was that there is a nascent market for new transit technologies that is worth digging in further on. And it's really learning that these new technologies that have kind of been, the land of venture capitalists and dreamers for a while are starting to become realities. And so we went back to council and said, all right, we really think we can potentially develop something here. Council directed us then to continue and develop the project in 2 parallel processes. One, to continue developing the project as a somewhat normal public project, get ourselves in the regional transportation plans and things like that. We did get this project adopted in the Plan Bay Area 2050, which was adopted in Oakland there's regional and local money in that overall cut of future money slated at something like 500 million. Now there's a lot of complication about what that really means in terms of whether that money is available to us. It's more like a pipe, and we still need to find the money to go through it. And we also were told, other than this public, kind of traditional public process, go and figure out how to bring in the private investment. Because one of the other things we learned in the RFI was not only that there's newer technologies coming to market, but there's a great deal more private investment that is willing to take the risk on transit projects. And so with that information, we are now developing a request for proposal to bring in a development group to work on this project with us. Next slide, please. We've been doing a decent amount of outreach, including presentations to the community working groups, been doing lots of outreach to industry. This isn't fully updated actually yet. We've been doing more general public workshops and the like as well. And if you are a part of a neighborhood group or otherwise interested group, we'd be happy to come talk with you. Next slide, please. All right, so what is this project? What are we really trying to get done? So the overarching goal really is to see if we can bring a new approach to developing transit in the Silicon Valley. You know, while we are very interested in seeing the airport connector project in itself, it has quite a lot of value. We would like to see expansion beyond the airport connector happen after this initial segment goes on. And we've been working with the cities of Santa Clara and Cupertino to lay the groundwork for that potentially happening. There is a corridor-wide elected steering committee looking at the future of that corridor. Folks are looking to this project to potentially be the forebearer of something there as well. Next slide, please. But focusing in on just this airport connector, what are we really trying to do, right? Now, from a conceptual standpoint, we're trying to make the airport and Diridon feel like one facility, right? You get off on your BART train, you get off on a Caltrain, you get off on a light rail or a bus, and you get on whatever this system is, and it feels like you're just moving around in one facility, right? And anybody who's been to some of the larger airports in the world, Denver always comes to mind for me. People are used to getting in some form of transportation to get around an airport. We want to make it feel kind of like that. Very fast, it's integrated, it's really well suited to carry folks with their baggage, everything at grade, as few staircases and the like as possible, all of that kind of stuff. The minimum project would be a connection between Terminal B, the southwest terminal, if you guys travel out of SJC much, to Diridon. Then there's options for further services, airport services, so getting out to Terminal A, the parking garages up north, there's going to be an airport there just south of Terminal B and all that. And what we're also seeing, and then future expansion, again, I've already talked about that. One of our interests is in seeing whatever we do here be able to be expanded. And so, we're not interested in a technology like what's been done in Oakland, where it's a pull cable. The expandability of that into other types of transit environments is just not very solid. The amount of folks it could carry and the complications of that operation get really heavy. So we're really we're putting guidelines in our RFP that try to focus on how do we do future expansion. And I'll also say that we're open to augmentations of the proposal here. We did get an unsolicited proposal already from a group. Then they wanted to put some intermediate stops between the airport and Diridon, particularly at Guadalupe Gardens. And then the employee areas in the south part of the airport and the like. And it really depends on whether it adds business value, right, to the project. Will it generate more ridership, generate more revenue, and will it slow down service? We really don't want that. A lot of technologies we're looking at are point to point. So you get on and you get off only, and you only stop where you want to get off. And so other stops, the way they're constructed, basically take the vehicles offline and don't stop folks. So that's part of what's going on. Next slide, please. All right, so project approach. So we are looking for a long-term private partner. This is going to be a public-private partnership, and we are expecting a private entity to come in and help us design build, finance, operate, and maintain the service. And so it's a little bit more like a franchise-like agreement with a private entity where the city would be offering the right to have this service. Now, it's a public-private partnership, so there certainly will be long-term public sector engagement and oversight over fares, integration, things like that. And so we're really trying to be the right public sector to partner in helping private sector folks feel comfortable with, basically we're asking private sector folks to pony up a significant portion of the capital costs and then take on the risk of revenue once the project goes on. And we're really trying to leverage favorable conditions. Like I said, part of the RFI learnings that we got were that there's actually a lot of private interest right now in this marketplace, and folks want to dig in. So we're trying to see if we can harness that kind of momentum that's there right now. Next slide, please. So a little technical slide here. I'll keep it high level. All right, so the RFP that's going out will not immediately lead to construction. We don't have the level of project definition that say BART has to be going into, all right, this is what we're doing. What we're trying to do, or what we are going to do, is release an RFP for a pre-development agreement. And this is a in vogue way right now to try and figure out how to accelerate the development of projects by bringing in the private partners who will help us define who will help us build the project as early as possible, so they're helping us define the project as well. And again, we're asking our private partners to take on a significant portion of the capital risk and the further revenue risk of the project. And so we only think it's proper to bring them in as early as possible in the project to do that. So that's what the pre-development agreement does for us. This really leverages what is going on in the private sector in terms of innovation, in terms of bringing their know-how into the project as early as possible, and that they have skin in the game from the very beginning. Right, so the beginning of this whole project will be what's called at risk, where they won't be making any money at all for quite some time on this project. And so again, it's a bit of a this project succeeds, you succeed scenario for the private sector and the public sector. And I don't need to read through the project risk transfers, but basically the private sector takes on a great deal more of the risk than the ways that we've been doing things in the past. Next slide, please. All right, so what's our schedule? We are releasing the RFP, if everything goes well, by the end of March. We did a read through of the all but final draft actually yesterday on the project team. Still have some procurement issues to iron out at a legal technical level, but other than that, looks like we're going to be on schedule for that. We'll then have the RFP out for 3 to 4 months and then bring a selection of the top 2 bids back to council for their approval. We'll then dig into those top 2 bids for about 6 months or so, and then select a final single group to work with. And we expect that a whole process to kind of take 18 to 24 months. And that will deliver us into what's called a project implementation agreement, where we'll really get into the project development and things like that. Next slide, please. And that's it. I know we're short on time, so I tried to do that fast. I hope I didn't skim over too much, but please, what would you like to know?
That's great, Ramses. Do you have an example that we could maybe send out in the chat, or you could drop in the chat, of a similar public-private transportation model?
There are some projects underway that are using a similar model. The one that's closest, it's funded a bit differently, is the Sepulveda Pass project in LA, where they are developing a new train line, as well as actually a highway lane as well, from the East Valley there into the heart of LA. And they're quite a bit more funded on the public side. They're actually doing kind of what NASA does, where they bring in 2 project developers and have them run all the way to the end, and then they're going to drop one near the end and select the final kind of proposal right before construction would go out.
Great. And there is a question about, is this the best resource to learn more about the project? San Jose ca.gov, your gov department offices /transportation /transport /transportation.
That's it. Yeah. And we really are trying to post everything we can on there. There's multiple presentations, mostly by me, posted videos on there, all the resources, all of the RFI responses are up there, unsolicited bids. We're trying to be as transparent about what we're doing as possible by posting everything there. So yeah, it's a great resource.
Great. Jonathan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions about this. I guess the first question I had is, if this connector process goes through and you the build process, would this public-private model forbid other people to provide service to the airport along that corridor? Like, for example, could VTA no longer run a bus route?
It is in discussion as to whether that would be the case. It would be preferable from the public, it is possible from the public perspective that it would be restricted in that way, but it has not been decided.
And then I guess the other question I had is, looking at all the things that you've said as far as requirements, it sounds like a lot of what you're doing could be serviced simply by having, efficient just a bus route that runs very frequently, potentially electric or whatever, so that if you're concerned about pollution. What is the goal behind, something that's different from that? Because that seems like, I've seen a lot of airports have private bus shuttles, or those buses that forward you from the transit and back and forth. I've seen that to other airports, even Japan does that, for example, along with trains. Is that one of the options?
Why spend all this extra money and effort and time building something instead of just running buses, which you can just put out there, right?
Yeah, and it's already very convenient and close, for at least for the airport.
It's a super important question. So from our perspective, there's a few answers to that. One, if you ever get on 87 during a peak period, you don't move. It's not convenient. It's not consistent, and we're just not able to produce the kinds of transit experience we really need to get people to move over. The problem with bus services are they're stuck in the same traffic as the vehicles, and to make transit really work, we need to make things more competitive. And so we strongly believe that getting things out of traffic and giving transit its own operating space as much as possible is something we would like to do. Two, we're looking for a larger system here, right? So that's kind of about this particular thing. We're also looking for this system to expand from what it is, right? So you could see a link out to North San Jose. You could see a link, in particular, we're talking about the Stevens Creek connection. There's a lot more to be had out of this than the airport connector itself. But the airport connector itself question needs to be answered. And from our perspective, the long-term bus service just isn't going to live up to people's expectations. We're going to end up with a huge amount of population growth downtown with everything going on with this project that we're talking about, the BART project, as well as all the Google and all of the millions of square feet and thousands of homes coming in. And so we see basically a bus service that would continue to be slow and unreliable.
Great, thanks, Ramses. Bill, I'll go to you, and then we'll keep going.
Thanks. I actually have several questions, and I just don't understand what you're wanting to do. Is it a tunnel system that you're hoping to do?
We are agnostic as to whether it's a tunnel or what. What we care about is that it's not a mixed traffic. So it could be a tunnel. Boring Company has said they might want to come build this. We'll see if we're interested in working with them. But could be above grade, could be a mix. There's some good arguments to be said that getting out of the airport underground is a great deal easier, and then going up after a certain point is a good way. So we're agnostic at the moment.
So like a gondola system or something?
We do have a couple gondola companies that have been talking to us. Unlikely that would be able to produce the kind of throughput we would need. But right at the moment, we're open to any technology that can solve, that can actually meet the project specifications.
So it would have to be a surface or tunnel or bus bridge, right?
Again, we're open to we're open to whatever will work and meet the specifications for the project.
And also, if Caltrain and BART are both getting to Santa Clara, what about tunneling under the runways to the terminal?
Yeah, so high-speed rail will never get to Santa Clara. There is a great
But they're getting to Diridon.
What's that?
They are getting to Diridon.
That's right. So this would be getting to Diridon, right?
So you pick up BART or you pick up Caltrain to get to Santa Clara.
Yeah, and so you just lost a significant amount of your ridership if you do that, right? So downtown San Jose at Diridon is an immensely growing activity center, and we will get a great deal more ridership if we connect to Diridon versus Santa Clara.
Yeah, understood. And one other quick question: why is Cupertino involved?
Right. So Cupertino, City of Santa Clara, City of San Jose, and to some degree the county as well, are part of a Stevens Creek joint planning effort. That planning effort was combined in the early phases of this project. We wanted to see airport to Diridon all the way down Stevens Creek all go out as one project. We greatly made this much less complicated by just doing the airport portion. But all of these groups together did submit a concept to the Plan Bay Area process and got a new Stevens Creek line nominated into the Plan Bay Area document. And so we are all working together on the future of that corridor. And again, all of those jurisdictions are looking at what we're doing here for the airport connector as a potential groundbreaking effort to see if we could do it there as well.
Okay, thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Ramses. We're going to keep moving. If we didn't get to your question, put it in the chat and we'll chase Ramses to get us a follow-up answer. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you have my, please feel free to share my email. I'm happy to take things offline.
Great, thanks, Ramses. Bernice, back to you.
Okay, next slide, please. So just wanted to share an update on where we are at with our business resource program development. We, for the last couple of years, have been working on analyzing the current climate for the small businesses in the area that will be in close proximity to the project. We established our small business task force and we've had several meetings. We did a significant amount of analysis and case studies of business assistance and looked at other projects that have done business assistance programs during big capital project delivery programs. We've done interviews with businesses and resource providers, and we've done surveying of the small businesses that are in the project area. So we've now taken all of that information and brought on a consultant, JC Lacey, and he has utilized all that analysis to start development of a business resource program. And this program will focus on various modes of assistance for small businesses during our project construction. And we are going to bring an update to the overall VTA board at our next board meeting on March 3rd. Next slide, please. So JC Lacey, who has been working on this plan, has developed a summary report and is finalizing recommendations and the details of those recommendations, but really came back to us with implementing a program that has 4 distinct aspects to that program. The first of those is a program for signage and wayfinding to ensure that businesses along the corridor are recognizable and can be easily accessed, and their storefronts are visible via signage, or access to their storefronts are visible via signage. Also, a VTA sponsored shop local marketing campaign, which would mean we would utilize VTA resources such as our website, possibly our buses and other things to really promote supporting those businesses during our construction. Would also have a small business development program, providing other things like technical resources. And then with maybe some very specific criteria, also have some potential for additional resources through grant programs, micro grants, and possibly a business interruption fund if there were some very specific criteria. As you all know, we are pursuing the single bore tunnel methodology to really reduce those impacts. But if there were some businesses that might have significantly more than anticipated and met some certain criteria, that's where we would look at some potential additional resources such as a business interruption fund. So with that, we are evaluating what potential addition resources could be, including those financial with the business interruption fund. And once we know the means and methods from the progressive design builder, we will meet with that contractor to assess those, and then we will pursue those other funding sources and grants if those means and methods identify something that would warrant putting in this business interruption fund. So we will bring the general overview that I'm providing today to our board, and then this summer, once J.C. Lacey finishes all the final elements of the plan, we will present the analysis and recommendations to the VTA board. And these are the next steps. J.C. Lacey finalized the recommendation report, present to the board, as I just mentioned, assign those resources for the business resource program, and evaluate if additional financial resources are needed. And in 2023, develop a staffing plan and budget. This is in preparation for construction. Develop the business resource plan, branding, website, collateral, and wayfinding, and then launch the business resource program in time to be ready for when we begin construction. Happy to answer any questions.
Not a question, but a comment from Nathan. Thank you for including the BIF into this process. And I'm not seeing any raised hands. Justin.
Thank you. So thanks for explaining this. I'm happy to see that there's a business resource program. This is something that won't happen until we break ground, right? So like not for years to come. This is just prepping. This is like the planning stage of what the resource would be, or what the program would be.
So early construction work is anticipated to start in the 2023 timeframe. So that's why in that plan, the previous slide, we actually would have the program ready to support those businesses when we begin construction. So we're doing all the preliminary efforts right now to ensure that the program meets the needs. Then we'll analyze what we've already developed based on the contractor's means and methods. Once we know exactly the proposed delivery methods and what type of access to businesses, if there's any sidewalk closures, any intermittent lane closures or things like that, that might like reduce access to businesses based on what their typical access. You know, there are some businesses that rely more heavily on foot traffic, others more on internet. So depending on what that access to those businesses are, we would implement the relevant elements of the program. But yes, definitely want to have this ready and doing these efforts in 2022 to be ready for 2023 construction.
Thanks, Bernice. One other question. I wasn't a business owner until recently. So now I am, and how do I get involved in that conversation? Or where is there a place I could do some more read up so I don't ask repeat questions, etc.?
We'd be happy to share all the information we have on the business program. So because you weren't yet established, you probably missed us interviewing you, but we are very open to any input you have and really happy to provide you any information. And we will make sure that once we start doing the outreach efforts and start implementing the program, that will include you with that.
Thank you.
Justin, we'll take it as a follow-up to follow up with you. All right, let's keep going. Oh, Chris, sorry. Did you want to say something? Nope. Okay. Sorry, you just came onto my screen. I wasn't sure if you wanted to say anything. All right, community engagement. So we've got quite a few things going on in the back end. It's something that you won't really notice until it's ready to launch, but we are making an effort to make sure that the VTA BSV website is a bit more functional. So up until now, the website has essentially been set up to provide information on the planning and preparation for the project, but we're conscious that we're going to have a lot more people coming to the web page for a source of construction information. So over the next year, we'll be making improvements to make sure that it's a bit more intuitive. There are some limitations, so it's not going to be potentially as fabulous as we would all want and love, but we're going to make sure that it's as accessible as possible. One of those key features is going to be an interactive activity map. And so that's going to give users a better sense of the alignment. And so they can also see all the project elements, like the stations, the mid-tunnel facilities, etc. Down the line, that can also be used for construction noticing. So people can go to the website and see, where construction is happening or where construction is upcoming. Another effort that we're going through right now is we're trying to make sure that what we call the constituent list, so our email database, is all up to date, because we want to make sure as well that when we do get ready for some of these major announcements that's coming over this year and then into the next for construction, that we're keeping as many people up to date as possible. And so that means checking that emails are correct, checking that phone numbers are correct, and that mailing addresses are right, because that's going to be really important to make sure that everyone is as up to date as possible. We will be sending out a survey after the meeting. We had hoped to do a live survey, but we're running a bit short on time. So we'll send out a survey after the meeting, which will give everyone an opportunity to have their say and share their ideas on a few different concepts. So let's keep going. Now, with 2022 kicking off and some big things happening for the project this year, we're excited to announce that we're inviting nominations for CWG chairs and alternates. And so what we're asking for is for members of the community working groups to nominate themselves to be the chair or to be the alternate if the chair is busy. And so the role of the chairs will be to help us set the agenda. And so what we mean by that is, what topics should we be talking about? Who should we be inviting? Is there something that is of particular interest to your community that should deserve maybe longer than a 5 or 10 minute update? Might be the focus of a whole meeting, for instance. And also, as I said, helping us find some guest speakers. The meetings will be continued to be facilitated by VTA and hosted by VTA, but it's just an opportunity for some of our more interested CWG members to hop in and help set the agenda. We'll also ask those CWG chairs to manage the report out section of the meetings. And so that's where we invite CWG members to share what they've been up to. And so if more than one person nominates for a chair or an alternate role, members of that CWG will vote. And we'll email the nomination form in the next 1 to 2 weeks. It's not a particularly large lift or level of effort, but we're hoping that people get involved and want to participate. And Alan, I see you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you. So for the website you talked about, would that be a place that local residents will be able to raise concerns, issues, or ask questions to the project?
Yeah, so we've got some interesting ideas that we're percolating. We've got percolating, including, you know, sort of an office hours approach where you could theoretically launch like a Teams call or a Zoom meeting, or, you know, it just like a one click to talk directly to a project team member. So that's an idea that we've got going. But the focus is really to make it kind of a virtual project office, where if you imagine the ability, you know, which will happen down the line, where you can walk into an information center and you can find everything that you want. And so the idea is to recreate that experience virtually so that people can come to that website, they can find out everything they need to know, they can leave a comment, they can potentially leave a complaint. Hopefully we don't get too many of those. But yeah, a one-stop shop for local residents.
Yeah, it's I know folks get you know, when there's construction nearby and there's like they notice some pollution ongoing, maybe dumping of things or noise issues. They don't want to just put a comment on a website. They'd like to have a ticket that's tracked.
Yep.
So, and you just saying, oh, just you know, file something with VTA or the City of San Jose, that's really not workable either, right?
Well, I'm happy to report that a key member of the team who's come on board in the last couple of months, hopefully he's still on the call, Lucas Perez. So he's actually one of VTA's customer service leads. And so he's part of the reason he's been brought on is actually to help improve that experience and to make sure that such things are, you know, a better experience for your residents and your community members. And also that these things are tracked through the appropriate means, which will probably be, just for those on the call, a platform like Salesforce or something like that, but it will be trackable, yes.
Okay. And, you know, links from the project website.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right. Not seeing any other hands raised or questions. Let's keep going. Oh, nope, sorry, Luke.
Sorry, I'm not sure if this is the right time to bring it up, but I think I missed my opportunity earlier about the Newhall BART station yard, about what work is being done this year in that area. I'm not sure if that's someone I could follow up with after this meeting to get a little more detail, but yeah.
Sure, we'll take that on notice and we'll get back to you after the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Moving on to Aaron. Hopefully he's on the line.
Evening, everybody. My name is Aaron Quigley. I'm in the Government Affairs arm here at VTA. And I just have a brief verbal update for you tonight, covering a couple of topics. One of them is just generally the situation in Washington with the federal appropriations, the spending bills that cover government functions each year. And then I'll just touch on briefly the infrastructure package that we all know was passed and signed into law by President Biden in November, and just highlight a couple of tools that folks that are seeking funding for transportation projects can use. And then I'll just wrap it up with a quick description of what's going on at the state level and budget discussions and what to do with the budget surplus that the state is enjoying. So on the appropriations for this current year, the federal government is operating as they unfortunately do too often under short-term, what they call a continuing resolution, which is a short-term extension of funding levels to current, well, the one they're operating under now, it's through February 18th. And that maintains the federal government's operations at the last year's funding levels until Congress can come to consensus and pass actual annual appropriations bills that would allow them to actually increase funding levels for key transportation programs and other government activities. The House passed their version of that annual, or well, they passed another short-term extension through March 11th back on February 9th, and we are waiting for the Senate to take action on a version of that this week. They have until Friday to avoid a government shutdown. There are some key funding programs within the FTA that are critical for the BART extension specifically, that aren't totally touched by this mini drama. The expedited project delivery pilot program that you often hear from staff about is the grant funding source we would go to for the federal investment in that project. And that program does already have about $100 million a year that has been appropriated to it. So even if it doesn't get more through the appropriations process, there is something in there every year for the next 5 years. I mentioned the infrastructure package. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was signed into law on November 15th. There's 375 programs in there that are either created or expanded by that spending package, with 125 of those programs being brand new. So that's a lot to navigate. And the Biden administration has been trying to make that easier for folks with resources to help agencies seek funding for their projects, including one guidebook they call Building a Better America, a guidebook to the bipartisan infrastructure law. And you can find that and like interactive databases of funding opportunities if you go to www.build.gov. The first of those to issue a notice of funding opportunity is the RAISE grant program, which funds a lot of different planning and construction activities with applications due April 14th. So we want to make sure cities and other jurisdictions know what opportunities are out there, and we'll always come to you with those updates. At the state level, January 10th was the deadline for the governor to propose his budget for FY 2022-2023, and he met that deadline and introduced a $286 billion budget for this year. And a lot of what's being debated at the state level is how to spend projected budget surplus monies. There's a lot more in the state coffers than was projected not too long ago. And so a big point of advocacy for VTA is to make sure that projects like the BART extension and Caltrain's electrification that have been successful in state cap and trade funding programs before, that they are able to go to the state and get a portion of that surplus money to help finish the funding plan. So that's a big part of our advocacy right now, is to ensure the legislature supports an effort to help us finish that funding plan with our state and local sources so that we can leverage that to secure the up to 2.3 billion that was outlined in the letter of intent from the FTA. So that's a lot. Happy to take any questions. And forgive me if my dog's barking in the background.
No worries. I think half the people on this call are in a similar boat. All right. Not seeing any questions. Thanks, Aaron. Let's keep going. All right, CWG member report back. So this will be the last time I'm doing this, because the next time we'll have the chairs or the alternates who will manage this section. All right, on to the member report back. We're going to start with downtown and Diridon. So I just want to invite any members of the CWG from downtown and Diridon, if you would like to raise your hand or just start speaking. All right, not seeing any members from downtown and Diridon who want to share what they've been up to in regards to the project. Let's keep going. 28th Street, Little Portugal. Would any CWG members like to share a report back?
Yeah, David would. A question has arisen from the neighbors as well as from Five Wounds Church and Cristo Rey San Jose High School. How will, and I sent this along to Kristen and Ron, maybe they got it, maybe they didn't. how is VTA going to secure that property, those 11 acres behind Five Winds Church, where the 28th Street Little Portugal Station will be built? How will VTA secure it so that it doesn't become the crash zone to Mineta San Jose Airport? What's happening there with squatters currently?
And Joe, I can jump in on that if just provide a quick answer. This is a issue and concern we have anywhere we buy property, not just in the Five Winds area. So the particulars depend on the timing of when we buy property, if there's tenants. So for example, if we get a property early and there's a tenant who wants to stay until we need it for construction, the best way to keep the activity is keep a tenant in place, and we'll do that. But when we get to the point where we have a property and it's vacant, and it's property that's going to be demolished, we don't wait for the construction. Our whole approach is to demolish the buildings and fence the site to prevent exactly the outcomes that you're describing.
How do you work with the city? Because I know that it's difficult to get buildings demolished when you want to reconstruct something, but they don't let you demolish until you have your PD permit.
At the risk of kind of raising a sensitive to the city. So VTA, as part of our statutory authority, we exist as a special district of authorities from the state. Transportation projects don't require local permitting. So when we proceed with demolition and construction, it's not through the permitting process that you're used to in San Jose development. Now, having said that, whenever we do work, we obviously coordinate with the city, both in terms of the fire department and sort of the other city departments that are affected. But we don't have a need to get an approval from San Jose City Hall to do demolition of buildings that will be torn down for the projects.
So will you demolish as soon as you take possession of the property?
Yes, yeah, that is our basic plan. We do what I'm trying to articulate is, from our perspective, it is very bad to have vacant buildings. It's very problematic to have vacant buildings. And so the solution is to demolish buildings and secure sites. And we're already underway. We have some sites, downtown where we've just secured the site and that's it. But I think for sites that are remote and have the risk that you're describing, absolutely, we want to clear the sites, fence them off. And then when the contractor comes on board, they can take it over and they'll have control and responsibility.
Okay, thanks, Ron.
All right, Bill, over to you, and then we'll go to Carlos.
Yes, thank you. My comment is less about 28th Street Little Portugal than about downtown and Diridon. I'm really concerned with pedestrian movement, in particular with the BART station only being on one side of Santa Clara in each of those places. So I would like to request an agenda item, and it might need to be at not at the 28th Street meeting, but perhaps at the Diridon meeting or the downtown meeting, about creating, you've said you can't have entrances on both sides, and I understand that, but we need to come up with pedestrian bridges or something just to not interrupt the traffic across Santa Clara. So I'm requesting an agenda item at a future meeting about
Sure. So what we'll do, Bill, is we'll take that on notice and we'll add it for the May meeting. And while it will probably be, let's just say, a longer presentation for downtown Diridon, we can also give perhaps an abbreviated presentation for 28th Street. Or alternately, you'd also be welcome to attend the downtown one if that's of interest to you.
Yes, thank you.
No worries. Over to Carlos.
I'm just curious to follow up on David's question. So I'm also concerned about the squatters and homelessness. So like in areas by the airport, basically, the authorities have shown that basically we don't have much control. Is there going to be a different way to handle squatters when these demolitions are happening, or are we kind of going by the same rules that we're going citywide?
Joe, I can briefly speak to that. So I think it's important to understand I can't speak to anything the city of San Jose is doing. With respect to VTA property separate from the BART project, with various locations, because we have facilities all over the county, this issue does keep popping up. VTA does have a protocol and a procedure. Whenever an encampment does appear, we have a process where we have, and this is a process that follows what other agencies do, where we contact the individuals and deal with relocation, and we will deal with it and get it done. So I think that we have a lot of experience and we're doing this already. My point earlier about specifically the BART project is just that when you have vacant property, we always try to fence off vacant property because that's the best way to keep problems from rising in the first place.
Thanks, Ron. All right, let's go on to Santa Clara. I'd like to invite Santa Clara members to provide a report back.
Hi there.
Hi, Anna.
How are you?
Great, welcome.
I think the last thing that I attended was your VTA presentation to the city of Santa Clara, which was excellent, by the way. It almost sounded like our city council was listening to you for the first time. It was like there were multiple questions and a lot of interest, and so that was what we needed, I think, to really shine a light that this is happening, that you are coming to Santa Clara. In fact, I do recall the mayor asking the question if there was a chance that the Santa Clara station would not be included in the project, like it would be dropped along the way, which I think is a fear. And you addressed that really well and said that it's not possible. You'd have to go back and start all over again to drop the Santa Clara station. So thank you for providing that presentation, because I think it really woke everyone up to the fact that this is real. So thank you for that. I think at this point, real community engagement, now that it's real, there'll be more dialogue about what's coming and BART and the whole process. So I just wanted to share that with you. That was very pivotal.
Great. And just as a reminder, March 22nd is that Santa Clara meeting. It's also my birthday. So I might skip that one, but March 22nd is that deeper dive into it with this city.
Thank you. Thank you. I
No
really
worries.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other Santa Clara CWG members? All right, not seeing any others. Let's go on to next steps. So I just want to give a shout out from the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. They have put information in the chat, so I encourage everyone to take a look. I'm just going to read it out straight. Hi everyone, Diego Ortiz, Director of Programs. I apologize as I have to hop to another commitment. I wanted to share with the CWG an invitation to a bike ride in partnership with VTA that will highlight the proposed locations of the San Jose BART Phase 2 stations. The ride is on March 5th, and you can register for the ride here. It's in the chat, and we'll also send it out after the meeting. Also, Bike to Wherever Workday is back in 2022, and signups for Energizer stations are now open. For more info, please visit bikesiliconvalley.org/energize, and feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. Diego@bikesiliconvalley.org. All right. So our next CWG meetings are on the 17th, 18th, and 19th of May at 4 p.m. They will be a virtual meeting. We will set it up so that CWG members are panelists when they enter the meeting. And provisionally, the agenda includes Phase 2 update, a CP Contract Package 2 update, which is tunnel and track work, an update on the Construction Transportation Management Plan, update on community engagement, and as always, a CWG member report back. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, and I apologize for the earlier technical hiccups. I hope everyone has a great night, and yeah, thank you all for coming. All right, good night.